say, look, there are a few that I think are evergreen, and then a few maybe additional I would reinforce. So, and I would put them into skills and character if you can. So, the skills, I think to me, the 2, 3 skills that are critical is one is problem solving skills. Second, I'd say is decisiveness, decision making skills. Third is, I think, results orientation. And these, I would argue, have always been important. I think the few, I would say, which are more in the spirit of character, I think that become increasingly important in today's world. One, I think, is resilience. Because leaders fail invariably, and I think the ability to pick yourself up and move on, so it's called resilience. Second, I'd say, is really this, the notion of being able to lead yourself. Many times, we get too influenced by what's happening around us, and I think this notion of being centered and knowing what is your inner purpose and what gives you energy and what you're good at. So I would say that whole second theme, I would say, is being centered. And third, I think, is really the soft touch, which is really being able to get the best out of the people you lead. How do you get them to be best at driving themselves and realize their potential? So I'd say skills, those 3, problem solving, decisiveness, results orientation, and then character, I'd say resilience, centeredness, and people touch. There's no leader, I believe, who's complete in everything. I think we all have our spikes. I think it's important for leaders to be self-aware, know what their spikes are, and I think they have to make arrangements to complement themselves with others who can fill in for what things they are not good at. I think that's just the reality of it. I think the biggest frustration I find sometimes is leaders are not self-aware and they don't make the necessary adjustments. And that, I think, can result in costly mistakes. I think, firstly, I think it's the nature of the world. It's also a reflection of the world we live in. I think there are new industries that are being born, where, in all honesty, you don't even have seasoned old leaders to count on. You think about retail, think about airlines, you think about digital world. I mean, there aren't really very old seasoned executives you could even lean on. So one, I think, is the birth of new industries and new companies that is causing that to happen. Second is, I do believe that the time frames in which you can develop leaders has actually gotten compressed, because the kinds of challenges that people are being thrown at and the kind of experiences people are getting by being globally exposed to different roles and opportunities also means that I think people are getting more ready earlier than later. I think it's less about age, but about the kinds of experiences that people get. In the old days, maybe it took 20 years to go through those 3 experiences, which you today can get through in 10 years. The world offers you those possibilities, and I think in companies and situations or people who reach out for those opportunities can definitely progress faster. I think, firstly, I don't think it's the only thing. I think digital, obviously, firstly, there's a lot of buzz around that as well. And I think in some businesses, digital is almost, if you're running a financial institutions today, I think arguably it is one of the top 1 or 2 topics for a CEO. I think digital is relevant for many businesses too, but I'd say that the rationale or the case for change could be different in different situations. I think in some cases, it's a new CEO, who has a new vision for the company. In some cases, it's an intergenerational transition in the family, which leads to a new context. In some cases, it could be a big external event, like an M&A or a massive merger. In some cases, it is a question of professionalization of a company, from a founder-led company to a management team-led company. In some cases, it may be disruptions in the business model, which could be digital or otherwise. So I do think that there could be many contexts for change. I think it definitely requires a lot of relearning. I think there's no question about it. I think the world is moving much faster than most executives learned when they grew up. So I wouldn't say it's easy. And I dare say that even some of the companies, I've recently met a CEO in a media business who I think is struggling to understand and make sense out of all these trends. So I think it's not trivial. I think it means that you as leaders have to consciously make the investment in getting up to speed. Reminded of Mr. Kamath, I think, who at the age of 67, I think I would consider still as one of the most tech-savvy, senior business leaders. I think that's the kind of inspiration I would look to. And I think it also implies that you honestly also have to surround yourself with younger people who are more up to date with the times and the trends. So it requires action on a couple of fronts. I think one of which is self-learning, one of which is, engaging with younger people in the organization. is not a trivial challenge. I think and the reason it's not trivial is because it starts and first and foremost with your own mindset as the founder or the CEO. And I think if you haven't experienced it, if you haven't gotten inherently convinced, you might not lead the organization through that journey. So I think most people are not equipped to do this well. I think, but if I look at the best practice, I'd say firstly you recognize it's a journey. I think a journey, but that starts with two, three principles. I think one is leadership is about breakthrough performance. So how do you make sure that you really stretch your leaders to deliver things that they thought they could not deliver? So how do you set stretch targets? And second is, how do you really support them in that journey? Because I think it's not about hire and fire. I think it's about stretch goals, but then also being available to support and provide problem-solving leadership when required. Third, I would say is, I think matching people with the right opportunities. Every leader is meant to do something special. And I think, how do you develop a better judgment on matching the best people with the best opportunities? That's the third, I'd say. Fourth is, I think, clearly building a culture where I think people understand and have a common vocabulary around developing leadership in the company. And I think putting it on the senior management agenda, like the way you review performance. Do you spend time to review your leadership pipeline?